Hi, I'm the Practically Speaking Mom's youngest son, Andrew. This is episode 49 of the podcast for intentional moms to build strong families. You'll definitely want to come back for a very special episode next week when mom and dad both are on the show to celebrate the 50th episode of the Practically Speaking Mom podcast. The theme this week is the importance of building legacy and family identity into our home life. Mom asked me to join her at the beginning of today's episode since she's talking about my leaving for college. On the day that this episode publishes, I will actually be experiencing my first day at College of the Ozarks near Branson, Missouri. Of course, I would be very thankful for your prayers as I begin this next stage of my life. Let's get started with More Intentional right now.
Andrew, thanks for joining me today. I wanted to take a few minutes at the top of this podcast because I'm going to be talking about you heading to college in just a little bit on the podcast. I wanted to ask you, what do you feel like has been some important things that we have focused on to help you prepare for adult life? What do you feel like have been key things? It might inspire moms to maybe focus on some things they haven't, or it might just serve as a reminder to them that, oh yeah, that's really important. I better be making sure that I'm working with my child in that area. I know when I asked you that question earlier, you had kind of come up with some main areas of life. So what are those main areas of life?
Right off the bat, I think of four main areas: work ethic, money management, social life, and then spiritual life. With work ethic, you have academics and you have jobs. And they kind of go hand in hand as far as how you, the level of effort you give into each. Obviously, you want to be giving full effort. And a verse that kind of goes along with that and has been kind of a staple verse as far as work ethic goes, and how I do my work is Colossians 3:23, which is, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart as if working for the Lord.
You have been just your personality type is that you really are kind of a perfectionist, and doing things extremely well is important to you. I know one thing we've had to work on a lot is balance with that. So tell us what kind of balance you've had to establish in your work ethic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Balance is, absolutely a journey that I've taken. It has been hard for me in sometimes to override my natural instinct to do things perfectly. Like you said, I'm a perfectionist in a way. But I realize, with the majority of employers I've had have valued the do it fast, it needs to get done. And that is counter what seems natural to me. But I've definitely grown in that as I've focused on that and sought to grow that in myself. So there is I don't throw out doing things well. I see it as doing things excellent, which is doing things well quickly.
Let's move on to the second area. What was the next one you said?
Money management.
Yeah. So how do we do money with kids?
Since a young age, and my older siblings can, attest to this too. When they were young, as I've grown up, my parents, mom and dad, have had us set categories for where when we get income, the money is split up into these different areas so that it's not all going to one place and then it's gone.
So basically what you're saying is whether you had earned $10 or $100, you automatically put that in, divided it up into categories. Mm-hmm. So 10% tithe and depends on the stage of your life. When by the time you're a teenager, a good chunk of that also is set aside for youth activities. Yeah. We've always had you guys pay half on like a mission trip or going to Chick-fil-A or summer camp or what, Chick-fil-A with a group of teens. So there was that category. There was spending money. There was short-term savings. What's the difference between short-term savings and long-term savings with us?
So I view short-term savings as things you might need more often, like a new phone or maybe a pair of shoes that you're wanting to save up for and buy. Long-term savings I view more as like things like college or like a car or a house, if you ever, are going to move out.
Right. So, So with short-term savings, that means a lot of people lump that in with spending, but instead we had you guys divide that up so that short-term savings means I plan ahead for it versus spending money is something I can spend frivolously without a plan ahead of time. I am in the mood for a Coke, so I'm going to buy a Coke. That's spending money versus short-term money. Short-term savings, I have a plan ahead of time. Yeah, that's awesome. In fact, money management, wow, I cannot overstate what a difference that has made in all of the kids, your siblings that are older than you, the difference that has made in giving them a firm foundation in adulthood is not spending more than you make and having a game plan ahead of time with how money will be spent. And of course, getting in the habit of tithing helps you have the mindset from early on that all of this came from God, and I'm going to honor Him.
Yep, and it's all still God's.
Yeah, yeah.
So I honor Him with what is not tithed, just like I honor Him with how I tithe.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What's the next category?
Social life. So within that is friends and family and things like that. So
yeah, you can imagine moms that are listening that relationships have been a really big focus of mine with my kids growing up. Just that I believe we were created for relationship with God first and relationship with others second, and handling every person that God brings in our path that day, be it someone who's in our path every day or only once, that we treat them with the honor of how they were created, that they're treasured and we should treasure them. So what are some things, Andrew, that you would add about relationships? What's been some emphasis areas for us?
When I think of being independent, mom and dad aren't going to be so much in my relational life so much because I'm going to be apart from them. Some characteristics that are useful. One is confidence and also professionalism, and not professionalism all the time necessarily per se, like with peers. You're not going to be as professional as you would with a supervisor or a teacher. But, areas such as that, areas such as empathy, which I view as other-centered, not self-centered, have been some key areas that our family has focused on. And I've definitely seen fruitfulness of that as I've sown seeds into teachers. I've seen how they respect me as a student for being professional and respectful of them.
Yeah, such as you bring up empathy. And really, that's something I've pushed all along with you guys before you make a phone call. Let's say, for one thing, I have you guys make professional phone calls at a pretty young age.
Yeah.
And before you get on there, we're talking about what's the point of the call? What do they need to hear from you first? What do you need to repeat in that conversation? If you're leaving a message, these kind of things. Empathy, that's on a professional level, empathy, but then empathy in friendships as well. That we're not takers in relationships. We are putting their needs in the forefront of our mind so that it shapes the way we verbalize things and the way we handle that situation. I think that was a great category to bring up. What's your last category?
Spiritual. And what you were talking about there as being other-centered, having empathy really plays into this because that's Christ's command. That is the, number one as believers, as those who are in Christ, that is our number one mission is love. Love God first and love others. And with spiritual, I would say that is not so much a separate category from the other categories. It really is foundational and woven in to every category of life. It seems that there are some key things to do, some key action steps to take every day that will feed into your other areas, if you are intentional about that. And first I think of is seeking. Jeremiah 29:13, seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart. You can seek God with your relationships. You can seek God with your school. You can seek God with your work ethic and with your struggles and with your, whatever they may be. God gives you strength, which ties into the next thing is remaining. John 15:4-5, which is about remaining in Christ, and he will remain in you. And as you remain in Christ and he in you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from Christ, you can do nothing. So, there's that dependence, there's that reliance on God's strength, there's that seeking of him. And as you grow in oneness with him, you gain that empathy, you gain that other-centeredness, you can gain that confidence in relationship. You can gain that a right perspective of money, wisdom in all of the areas of life as you grow in seeking Christ and God.
So, Andrew, I just love always your influence on me spiritually. And I love that you are a humble person who also, even though I'm your mom and you are incredibly respectful of me, you're not afraid to say the hard things to me when I need to hear them. And I love that about you. But I love so many things, but especially your spiritual life. Now, I would also want the moms to know you very much have been influenced by Chip Ingram podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are they podcasts?
So he does have a podcast. I've listened to him on Spotify, which he's one of the few preachers I've found on Spotify. But he does have a podcast, Living on the Edge. That should be on the podcast app, or he has his own Chip Ingram app on the App Store.
Is that where you've listened to his full-length stuff also? Or do you listen to that some other way?
So his full messages all the way through, I've listened to on Spotify. But how his podcasts work is that his sermon messages are split up half and half into like 30-minute episodes rather than the full complete thing. So it's kind of a part one, part two with each
And he's
sermon.
awesome too at focusing on relationships and for sure focusing on weaving godliness throughout every aspect of your life. He's great. And so he's been a huge influence in you in your teen years.
Yes.
And that's awesome.
Yes.
Of course, your own father has too. Has too as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
But the moms that are listening might really be interested in Chip Ingram for their whole family or for their sons. Yeah. And then also Alistair Begg, which I would say they need to listen to Chip Ingram first, because Alistair Begg is like a whole nother level of deep. Yeah. And their sons would not be ready for him yet, possibly, until they've had some more basic than that. So tell us briefly, how do you listen to Alistair Begg, or how could they listen to him?
Like you said, Alistair Begg is much more in depth, much more verse by verse, word by word, really the teaching of very in depth.
And yet he's super interesting. We're making him sound really boring, but he is so interesting to listen to and inspiring. Yeah. The truth is very inspiring. Yeah. Especially taught by someone like him. Oh, yeah. Anything more you want to add about him real quick?
I mean, with both of them, I would say be intentional, because I've done that before. I can hear it, but not really listen. And it just seems like when you're open, when you are really listening, it just seems like the Spirit can really reveal a lot more to you. So I would encourage you to be intentional as you listen to both Chip Ingram and Alistair Begg, and whoever you do.
Andrew, thanks for joining us for a few minutes today. And I don't know how I'm going to learn to live daily life without you, but I'm very proud of you, and I know that you're going to bless many, many people.
Thank you.
In this new stage and in this new environment. And all of these mamas are going to be praying for you today and this week as they listen to the podcast. Yeah. And I love you very much.
Love you too. Thanks.
Well, do you know what I've been doing today? My fifth child, youngest son, Andrew, is moving out of state to attend college. So he and I were cleaning out his room, going through all his clothes and books and, memorabilia to determine what he should take with him, what he should get rid of, what he should put in storage. We ended up collecting 4 donation bag full Well, we also went through lots of things that used to seem important that, well, they were just trash now. We saw old accomplishments too, trophies and ribbons and certificates, and remembered his efforts. A month ago, my husband and his siblings were doing something very similar with his mother's items after she passed away. And I would imagine that many of you have been taking this quarantine time to clean out your closets and attic or garage or whatever. And I'm finding that sorting out, decluttering, reducing items, it serves, a lot of purposes, but 3 purposes I've noticed that it serves. 1, reducing clutter helps our life feel less chaotic as we know exactly what we've got, and it's at a much more manageable amount of stuff. Minimalism reduces stress, and it costs less to maintain, and it takes less of our time to manage all this stuff. So that's all a plus. A second thing that I've noticed that it helps when we declutter is sorting out all of our stuff allows us special time to remember. Good memories, they are grounding to us. And so when we hold something that it brings back a memory, then that helps us know that we belong in this world when it's a good memory. They connect us with our heritage, and it helps us re-examine our current path and our current priorities to see if we're aligned with where we want to go. If I look at this memory item and it was a good memory, I ask myself, am I still doing the things that would produce more of those kinds of memories? Or if it reminds me of a bad memory, it still gives a good opportunity to reflect and ask if I'm still doing the things that could produce that kind of memory. So it really has been a very good time as we have cleared out things in our own home, or now going through my son's things, or going through some of Rich's mom's things. Just a time for reflection and re-examining our life and what really matters and what we should get worried about, frustrated about, consumed by. So memories, though, I do want to just take them a little further, probably because I'm feeling nostalgic as I'm getting ready to say goodbye to my son very soon. So these items, there are some of them that we should hang on to. Now, I'm a get rid of stuff kind of person, okay? I, generally speaking, do not hold items really close and special, can't get rid of it. And in fact, I'm kind of the opposite. Sometimes I will purge things and then I'm like, oh man, why did I get rid of that? That was kind of important. So if anything, I lean a little too far on the other side. But, it is important for us to keep some things that represent who we are or who our family is, what our heritage is. I have this little plaque that is a Bible verse. It's just a plain little, rectangle red plaque with black letters. It's a Bible verse that I gave to our grown kids. I gave each one of them one of these plaques, and we kept one for our house when we moved out of state 5 years ago. You see, we'd lived in Wichita, Kansas for almost 20 years, and we had grown deep roots there, and we never planned on leaving. 3 of our kids were staying behind when we were going to be moving. They were staying behind because they were grown. This was basically splitting our family in half, and it was heart-wrenching. Well, God gave me a Bible verse that was both clarifying for me about the move, but it just was very comforting to know that God had given me a promise. And you know what the words were? They were Genesis 31:49. May the Lord keep watch between you and me while we're absent from one another. Now, I came to know later that this Bible verse in Jewish tradition is called the Mizpah, and in the Victorian era, it became common to wear it on jewelry to signify your love for someone or God's bond between 2 people, whether friend or family. So on the day we had loaded up the moving van to pull away, I gave the grown kids one of these plaques with the Mizpah on it, and I got one to take with us to our new to us home in our new state. Now that plaque, when I look at it today, it is much more than just a piece of wood with a Bible verse on it. It's our family's promise that God will keep watch on each of us. And it's our reminder that this move was God's will, not our desire, not our idea, not our fancy. It was His direction that we were following. And thus each of us could know that it would be good, that it would be good for us, and it would be for His glory. So sometimes objects that we have, they are more important than just a memory. They are an important part of our legacy. And, throughout the Bible, we see examples of God telling people to keep memorial stones as reminders to talk about with their children and their children's children about what God has done in their life. Something, tangible to show their kids and to say, this is what happened. This is how God worked in our lives. We have another one of those in our family. I don't remember if I've talked about this on a podcast before or not, but we have an old brick that came from a cave from my grandparents' property in Iowa. My two oldest daughters, when they were little, went with my parents to Iowa to visit my grandparents, their great-grandparents, and one of them followed a kitty into this cave, and the walls were built up in there with bricks, and the bricks was very old and fell in. She fell to the ground underneath this pile of bricks. My other daughter ran to tell the adults to come quick. And they were digging out pulling out the bricks off of her. And she did not have one scratch, one bruise. She said she never even felt a brick on her, even though she was laying down, had been knocked down by it. I kept one of those bricks because God had protected her that day. It could have killed her, and it didn't even scratch her. It didn't even bruise her. And so these kinds of things, we want to keep some things in our life that represent our family's heritage and our family's legacy, that says God is at work in our family. And that builds a family heritage, legacy, bond. Let's just imagine for a minute that there's two separate sports teams, okay? One team has no group identity and the bond is low and the loyalty is low. Then let's imagine that there's another sports team and they have bonded over their name, over their mascot, over their motto, their school symbol. Their loyalty is high and they do anything for each other. The teammates, when they're making decisions, they hear their coach's voice in their head saying, we're a team who does the right thing. We're a team who sticks together. We're a team that doesn't give up. Now, what's your family team characteristics? What's your family identity? You can affect it. Maybe you have some not great family history. Well, create some new family history. Set some new values. Speak those value systems into your family. Here's some of the things that you would hear me say to my kids. We have different categories, okay, of things. Like I'm going to tell you what values I mention regarding how we treat other people or how we are with other people, okay? One is we do things with excellence. We do what is right, not what is easy. We care about others. We represent Christ well, and we won't do things that would hinder our witness. So those might be some of the things that you would hear me say to my kids about our family. This is our family identity. This is who we are. This is how we handle things. That is what I call visionary parenting in my book, Wearing All Your Hats Without Wearing Out. One of the roles of parents is to be a visionary, cast vision into their mind of who that child is. And in this case, we're talking about who you are as a family. And then that really helps shape the decisions they make and how they carry themselves and what they believe when the world lies to them, right? So intentional parents, figure out your family values and your family identity. Are you a camping family or a foodie family? For Team Harrison, we are a musical family. We are a projects family. We tend to have a lot of projects. We are a financially responsible family. We're a volunteering family. We are a God-following family. You want to do the same thing with your marriage as well. What are the values of your marriage? Set a vision for that. Determine your marriage values. Well, okay, I kind of went off on a little rabbit trail here about that we were going through my son's room, getting ready for college. But what it does as we were going through that, and I explained this to you before, is that it causes us to reflect on our past, where we've been, which causes us to think about where we're at right now and where we're headed. Do we have our priorities in order? This is the same thing that all of us have been experiencing with the pandemic, as well as we spend more time at home, and just a fruit basket upset of all of our life has shifted. And as we try to figure out what does life look like now, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to handle this, it's causing us all to reevaluate our values and our priorities. And so that's some of what was going on in my own mind and heart today as I was dealing with my son getting ready to go to school. And it causes you to reflect on how we spent our time and what he involved himself in, the different extracurricular things. And did I spend time enough on this or on that? And all of these things of reflection, right? And remembering. Well, moms, even though Andrew is my 5th child to pack up and move on, it is still heartbreaking to my mama heart. It is tough to realize and to try to accept that our time of being the main person to pour into our truth into them, wisdom into them, good habits into our kids, that time comes to an end. Many great times are going to follow this stage. And I even know from personal experience with my other kids, in fact, the stage of being in a relationship with your adult child happens to be my favorite of all of the stages so far. But that doesn't mean that this letting go thing, that it's easy. It's not. It's heart-wrenching for moms. It's heart-wrenching for me. Literally, I would say you go through a time of mourning the loss of this child-parent relationship, and then moving to a grown child-to-parent relationship. And that can be awesome and wonderful, and I love it. But mourning the loss of this relationship, it is painful. It's so difficult to go from being the primary one to care for and be concerned for that other soul to being, honestly, someone sitting in the bleachers and watching their life from a distance. Now, I've been learning something about this mourning process with each of my kids as they have moved to adulthood and moved out. Here's what I found. God has purpose in the mourning. And I'm talking about mourning. I believe He has work for it to do in us. I also believe specifically about the process of our child leaving and this mama mourning process that follows, that special time of mourning produces prayer in the Christian mom for that child and all the future days of that child. The Bible says that the prayers of the saints are bottled up as a sweet aroma to the Lord. And with each grown and flown child, our prayers increase for them as we have moved to the top bleacher of the game of their life. I pray much more for my children now than I did before because I have time, because my heart longs to be involved and to make a difference in their life. And prayer is the primary way that I do that now. We see the bigger picture from that place in the bleachers that can't be seen when we're down in the game. When we're in the coach's spot down low, there are things we don't see that once we're up in the bleachers, we can see. It's a great, great location for prayer. And so I'm going to close out today by sharing with you my milestone moment prayer for my son. I actually shared this back in podcast episode 3, but I just have to share it again today. And I hope that it will help you, that it will motivate you, that for those of you who are at this same spot that I'm at, that it might comfort you. But for the rest of you who are not yet at that spot, I really hope that it inspires within you even more diligence to be even more intentional, but to also realize that ultimately this child is in God's hands, and you can trust your good, loving Heavenly Father who is specific and personal in his leading of your child. So my milestone prayer for my son: dear Lord, I thank you for our son that you entrusted to his father and me these past 18 years. You alone know the days that lie ahead for this young man. May you go before him, making the rough places smooth and the crooked places straight. May you go along behind him to comfort and repair when the path has been difficult. And as he traverses the mountains and valleys ahead, may they be effective in his growth, producing wisdom and strength. Lord, please keep his feet in the center of your will and his heart turned always toward you. May his passion for you be stronger than the temptations of the world, and your guidance be louder than the distractions. Surround him with people who will encourage him to rise above pitfalls, who lift him to new heights, who challenge him toward greater victories than ever before, and who love him sincerely and even sacrificially. Give him the courage to bring you glory instead of seeking his own accolades, and continue to show him that you and I love him unconditionally. Help me to allow him to stumble and explore, but to also know when to speak up in wisdom or even admonishment, but only when you want me to. May I be a good listener, his greatest cheerleader, and his biggest prayer warrior. And then, dear Lord, please teach my heart how to walk my road without him near, how to live at a further distance that gives him freedom and growth, allowing us to become lifelong friends that bring mutual edification in a deep, indescribable bond of love. And help me always to live in joy and anticipation of the days to come, exemplifying to my children that your ways are worthy and wonderful.
You've been listening to the Practically Speaking Mom podcast, the place for an intentional mom to build a strong family. In podcast episode number 3, Mom first introduced the prayer that you just heard. Episode 3 is titled Ways to Love Your Child from Toddler to Teen and Learning to Let Them Grow Up. So that may be another podcast that you'd like to listen to soon. If you haven't registered to receive the Practically Speaking Mom's weekly email containing her blog post and podcast each Monday, you can do that by going to practicallyspeakingmom.com. It only takes a few seconds to register. Also be sure to connect with her on Instagram and Facebook at Practically Speaking Mom. Don't forget to listen to the podcast next week as our family celebrates the 50th podcast episode. It should be a lot of fun. It's been an honor to spend time with you today. God bless you and your family.